Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us again on another episode segment, whatever we want to call this, of BizBooks. My name is Gene Marks. Hopefully you've been enjoying our other conversations with some great authors of business books. And today I've got another great author standing here ready to talk, Jon Picoult. John just told me his sister Jody is the novelist that my wife and I read all the time, which I just found out and find that really interesting. But more interesting is Jon's book. Jon's has written and recently released From Impressed to Obsessed, 12 Principles for Turning Customers and Employees into Lifelong Fans. So first of all, Jon, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure to be here, Gene, and I'm glad that you're as much a fan of my book as you are of my sister's.
I loved your book, and I love customer service content, and I love good stories, and you got plenty of them in here, and we're gonna jump into that in just a minute. Jon's website is Impressed to Obsessed, the number 2 in the middle, and because nobody can spell that, including me, it's impressed with 2 S's and obsessed with 2 S's. Jon, just tell us a little bit about your background and why you wrote this book.
So my background, I worked in the corporate world for a little over 15 years in executive roles at Fortune 100 companies. And I decided to launch my own firm in 2009. That's Watermark Consulting, which is a customer and employee experience advisory firm. I always wanted to write this book. I had it in me for, probably almost a decade. It was one of the few good things that came out of the pandemic was actually the lockdown that gave me the opportunity to just focus on writing the book. But you ask why I wrote it. I really wrote it because what has always bothered me in my time in business is how organizations subject their customers and their employees to all kinds of indignities.
Yeah.
You could easily argue that the business world is often devoid of humanity. And what bothered me about that, and you see that, quite honestly, right? You see it more than ever right now during the pandemic times, because you hear these horror stories of airline passengers that are on, hold for 8 hours trying to rebook a flight. You certainly see it with the Great Resignation and employees finally throwing up their arms and saying, I'm done, I'm not going back to that job. But there are a whole host of really simple, straightforward things that, in my view, organizations and their leaders can do to fundamentally improve the quality of the experience that they deliver to both their customers and their employees. And I really wanted to get all of that out on paper. And that was really the genesis of the book.
Do you ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David?
I've seen an episode or two. I'm not a regular viewer.
There is a specific episode a couple seasons ago where he tries to unwrap something that is in one of those plastic packages.
I've seen that clip. Yeah.
And I don't know if that was sort of the motivation for your first chapter, but you talk about rap rage.
Yeah, here we go. I got my prop.
Right. That's it is. Tell us about rap rage and why you chose that to kick off your book.
Yes. So, the story of rap rage, and specifically Amazon's response to the phenomenon of rap rage, I think is a great example of a company truly appreciating what the customer experience is and what it takes to actively manage it. And, the way the story goes is, all consumers hate these packages, right? It's just, but the thing, everybody knows you start to rip them open and then the edges are razor sharp.
Yes.
What you might not know, though, is that in the United States alone, each year, over 6,000 people end up in the emergency room with injuries inflicted from rap rage. They're trying so hard to remove the product from this ridiculous packaging that they lacerate their bodies so badly, they need to go seek out an ER physician.
Right.
But what was fascinating about Amazon is they started to get feedback from people in the mid 2000s about their packaging. And people would say, gee, it was really easy to buy off of your website, but boy, it was a real bear to open up the package that you sent me. And so Jeff Bezos and his management team in 2008, they hatched their response to the phenomenon of rat rage, and it was frustration-free packaging.
Mm.
And if you or your listeners, are a frequent Amazon buyer, you know what that is probably now. It's, when they take the product out of the clamshell and they just put it in a simple cardboard box. You get it, you take it out, you give it to your kids. There's no crying or tears, no blood or lacerations, and everybody's a lot happier.
Mm.
But what's interesting about that is Amazon focusing on a touch point, the actual opening of the package, which many would argue is outside of their wheelhouse. Many people would say, hey, once Amazon ships it from their warehouse, that's it, they're done.
Right.
But Amazon recognized the wide spectrum of interaction points that, even if subconsciously, would shape people's perceptions of their experience with the firm. And one of those touch points was the act of opening up the package.
Right.
And so they chose to invest as much time and effort in managing that final touch point as they did in lots of other touch points much earlier in their life cycle, things that are more clearly within their wheelhouse. And I like that story because I think it illustrates for businesses how you really need to take a broad view of all of the touch points and interactions that comprise your customer experience. It's not just customer service. It encompasses things actually that affect your customer before they're even a customer. When they hear an advertisement or they see a post on social media about you, that's part of your customer experience. And even all the way through to if they defect from your business. You hope that never happens, but if it does, I'd argue that point of defection is a bona fide part of the experience that deserves to be managed as carefully as any other.
Now, not just customers, but employees as well. I mean, you mentioned that in your second chapter, and this is also in the title of your book.
Right. Yeah. So very early, as you note in the book, I make it clear that I use the term customer very broadly.
Yes.
Sometimes a customer is an individual consumer who's writing the check, paying for your products or services. Sometimes it might be an individual at an institution if you're in a B2B business. But sometimes your customer can also be a colleague that's just a few steps down the hall.
Sure.
Or your customer could actually be a member of your staff. And I do think that it is very appropriate for leaders to view their employees as a certain type of customer. Because while they're not paying you, you're paying them. Nonetheless, they are seeking to derive value from their relationship with the firm, just as a traditional consumer is. And the neat thing is that many of the techniques that are used to strengthen engagement between a consumer and a company can also be used to strengthen engagement between an employee and a leader. Things like, are you responsive to me? Do you communicate with me clearly and transparently? Do you advocate for my interests? Do I feel better after I have interacted with you as compared to before? And so that's why the 12 principles in the book can be applied to any kind of constituency that you serve, whether it is a traditional customer, a consumer, or a colleague, or even your own employees.
So John, because you use this broad term of customer that includes both consumers and employees, that impacts any business's P&L. So, if you are providing great customer experience, that can impact your revenues, obviously, by retaining customers and having them come back. But it also could have a broad impact on your productivity of your business as well, if you're treating your employees like customers. And in the end, that all comes down to the bottom line. Now, your company, Watermark Consulting, you do an ROI study that looks at the economic calculus. Tell us a little bit about what that study is.
Right. So,
and by the way, do you do this every year?
It's not every year. We first did it probably about a decade ago, and since then have updated it a few times. So every few years we refresh it. So what the customer experience ROI study does, it was actually one of the first analyses that showed a relationship between the quality of a company's customer experience and its shareholder returns.
Hmm.
And just to take a step back, the genesis of that study, it was really born out of my own personal frustration. It was born out of my frustration that I saw so many executives, so many boards of directors that would routinely take a leap of faith when faced with with other types of investments that had questionable or intangible ROIs.
Yeah.
Things like hiring a multi-million-dollar celebrity CEO, or things like embarking on a multi-million or billion-dollar acquisition. These are examples of endeavors that you have to take a leap of faith because you just can't know for sure whether they're going to work out.
Right.
And I saw companies routinely take that leap, but yet the minute they were given an opportunity to invest in improving their customer experience, then suddenly everybody's like, let's get the pencils out and sharpen them. Let's really figure out exactly how much this is going to cost, where exactly we're going to see the benefits and the returns. And I think that different approach really revealed, in my view, sort of the deep-seated skepticism that many executives harbor towards customer experience, feeling that it is somehow intangible and soft, the benefits.
Yeah.
And so, it was one night, it was 6 months after I started my company. It was around the holidays time, and I was just racking my brain saying, how do you persuade these executives that the return from a great customer experience is very real and very tangible? And that's when it dawned on me that you had to speak their language, and their language is the universal business language of shareholder value. Whether you're a public or a private entity, everybody kind of gets shareholder value. They understand it, can wrap their head around it. And so that was the genesis of the study, was looking at the top 10 publicly traded companies in customer experience, not ones that we're picking, but based on consumer research studies, and comparing that to the bottom 10 in customer experience. And in the book, the latest version of the study's in there. It's got 13 years of data, and the customer experience leading firms on average outperform the laggards by 3.4 times to 1, 3.4 to 1 ratio. I mean, it's pretty stunning when you look at the graphic. Not only the benefit that the companies that excel in this regard are realizing, but also the penalty that's being exacted on the companies that are not doing it well, because they're not only lagging the customer experience leading firms, they're actually lagging the market index.
Right.
So yeah, I've found it's a very helpful tool for really getting people to open their eyes to the fact that customer experience, the ROI is hardly soft and intangible.
What do you mean when you say in the book that some companies, if not all companies to an extent, are delusional? You use that as an example when you're having like sort of like the competitive bar between companies. And is it just because we think we're providing a great customer experience even though we're really not?
Yeah, I mean, that is it. And I think it goes back a little bit to human nature, right? We all like to think that we're doing a good job in whatever it is that we're doing. And, how do you live with yourself if you just accept, wow, I am awful at what I do? But I think that, many companies, there's that kind of psychology where they want to think that they're doing better than they can. The other thing too is that many companies are very insular. They operate in a vacuum. At the executive level, it's really difficult for people to carve out time to get out of the corner office, to go to where the experience happens, to spend a half day in the call center, to spend a half day on a ride along with a salesperson, to go to the retail store, to call up your 800 line yourself and pretend to be a customer, to observe customers in their natural habitat, because that's really only when you start to get a very clear sense of what it feels like to be your customer. And absent that, it's very easy to deceive yourself. And in the book, as you probably saw, there's been studies that have been done on this where, a famous one is done by Bain & Company, where they went out to companies, executives, they said, hey, how many of you think your company delivers a great customer experience? And 80% of them raised their hand and said, hey, that's us. And then they went to those companies' customers and asked the same question. And only 8% of the customers agreed. And yeah, so
I take responsibility for that now. So obviously I'm not running a big business, but besides the writing that I do, John, I run a company outside of Philly. So I have 10 employees and we sell CRM software. We do like
right.
Salesforce and Dynamics, all that kind of stuff. And I'm as delusional as the worst of the people that you write about there. Like I don't survey, I don't ask, I don't. And I think part of it is a lack of self-confidence. Like I don't want to know, we've got,
Right.
we've got like 600 clients, we've done well. But at the same time, I'm sure we could be doing better if I would ask the hard questions, if I would actually go on site to some clients and saw what they were doing. And I think I am deluding myself because of that. And that was one of the takeaways from that chapter, thinking like, I really need to look myself in the mirror,
Yeah. And I would also add, it's not, that exercise isn't just about figuring out what you're doing wrong so you can fix it. You could even be doing everything perfectly and your customers could be happy, and that exercise would still be valuable, because the other thing that it does is it opens your eyes to needs that your customers have
Yeah.
that they might never have thought to articulate to you, because they never thought that you could actually help them with it. They thought, it was outside of your wheelhouse.
Right.
And yet it shows you an opportunity to maybe get into a tangential offering, with your business, to branch out into another product or service, or to tweak your experience in some way to deliver something that meets a need that your customers haven't articulated to you. So even for those companies that are doing great, that are legendary in customer experience, it's an exercise that still reaps lots of rewards.
For me, it's also two benefits, of getting over that delusional concept is it can identify where my employees might need some more training or expertise if they are falling down, so I can invest in them. The second thing is, listen, I mean, your first business class you took in college always taught you that, the greatest source of your additional revenue should come from your existing clients and customers and not new customers. And, I spend so much time and effort trying to bring in new business for my company. If I were just be more honest and outreaching to my existing clients, less delusional, that would help. Anyway, it was a powerful chapter, and I appreciated the concepts. Now, you've got 12 principles for doing this. Guys, if you're watching this, you can buy the book and read it. You can go through with the 12 principles. I'm not going to sit and force you to go through and list through each one of them. But I did want to go into some of these principles, just some of the examples that you used, just to pull out some of the things that I thought were like kind of cool stories. Okay. So I am going to jump around a little bit. I hope you don't mind. But you had one principle called finish strong, and you used Alaska Airlines as an example in that chapter. If you remember that story, can you share that? Go ahead.
So what the finish strong principle relates to, and it's really grounded in cognitive science, as is the case with many of the 12 principles, because a great customer experience is as much an exercise about shaping people's experiences as it is about shaping their memories.
Right.
As I explained in the book, memory shaping is an important part of this.
You're only as good as the last thing you do, right? That's what remains in people's mind.
Right. Because it's people's recollection of their experience with you that's going to drive their repurchase and referral behavior. And how people remember the experience is actually different than what they know and feel as they're going through the experience. So anyway, finish strong is one of those memory sculpting techniques. And it ties back to something called the recency bias, which is a psychology principle that basically means that the last thing that happens to us exerts a disproportionate influence on our overall perceptions of the experience that we just went through. So what it essentially means is in day-to-day life, you could do stuff that your customer really doesn't appreciate and like, and you could do that kind of early in the interaction. But if you end the interaction on a really high note, that actually, there's a good chance that's going to eclipse a lot of the negativity that happened earlier in the experience. And so
this is the Game of Thrones theory. This is where you watch, every season of like the greatest TV show ever, and then they just blow it in the last 3 episodes of the series. And then he's like, it just sours.
And that's all anybody talks about.
Yeah, then that's all anybody talks about, and then you don't even want to go back and watch it again because you're like, oh my god, all I have is a recollection of how lousy it was in that last season.
Right. But yeah, that's a good example. But
It's-
so with Alaska Airlines, the example I use there is because the airline industry, I think, has neglected for a long time the
Mm,
final interaction point with a traveler
mhm,
when they have sort of a passenger experience, and that is the baggage handling, retrieving your bags from the carousel.
mm.
Because no matter how wonderful the onboard experience was, if I get down to the baggage carousel and I have to wait 45 minutes for my bag to come out, that is not finishing strong. That's
You're
finishing on
right.
a low note. And that is really going to anchor my overall perceptions of the experience.
Right.
So one of the things that Alaska Airlines did back in 2008 is they rolled out what they called their baggage guarantee. It started as a 25-minute baggage guarantee, and then they got better and made it 20 minutes, where it stands today. And what it meant was that the minute the plane hooks up to the jet bridge, the clock starts ticking. And basically, after 20 minutes, if your bags are not rolling out off of the carousel, then Alaska Airlines is going to give you a credit to your frequent flyer account, or they'll actually give you a voucher, a credit for towards future travel on their airline.
Hmm.
And interestingly, the year after they rolled this out, they started this incredible 12-year winning streak with JD Power being rated the #1 airline in customer satisfaction in North America.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not going to suggest it was only because of the luggage touch point that they did that. They were doing a lot of things right. But I think a really important part of it was the fact that they were really emphasizing that final touch point. And that left people with an overall positive impression about the entire experience, not just the baggage retrieval.
Finishing strong. Okay, another principle you talk is about making it effortless. And we talked earlier about Amazon, but listen, Amazon is such a great example. You can write, yeah, and there have been books written about Amazon and how they are with customers. I mean, they are at that gold standard. But you write about Amazon's one click, and I think we're all familiar with that. But give us your thoughts on why since introducing that one click, they really did hit a nerve with customers that
Yeah.
improved their service.
Yeah. So, back in the early days of Amazon, one thing that Jeff Bezos and his team saw was a lot of cart abandonment,
Hmm.
which means, you put stuff in your cart and then it just sort of sits there. It's
Right.
like the ghosts of the internet, all of these abandoned carts. And it's still a problem today. It's still something that online retailers struggle with today. But one of the things that Amazon put their finger on is that potentially one reason why people were abandoning the carts is because they had to invest so much effort to check out. Because even if I had used Amazon before, I had to key in all the information again, my address, my credit
Right.
card, payment information, all of that. And whenever you saddle your customer with effort, meaning they have to more data entry, more mouse clicks, more using your vocal cords to tell
Sure.
your story over and over again, that just saps their loyalty. It saps their engagement. And so that's when Amazon came up with this idea of, let's save people's information. Let's save their address. Let's save their payment information. And then we'll have this one-click purchase button where with a single, with just the twitch of a finger, everything is taken care of.
Yep.
And that actually was a patented feature on the website,
Yep.
which created some controversy because some people felt that it was like patenting the steering wheel.
Yep.
But Amazon successfully patented it, and other companies like Apple even, they were paying royalties to Amazon for many years until the patent expired just a few years ago. But that is a great classic example, I think, of removing unnecessary effort from the customer experience and then creating not only a better experience, but also greater likelihood that you're going to convert more sales prospects into customers. That's the fascinating thing, I think, about the Amazon story, is that many times in the marketplace, the company that has the best product or service might not be the one that wins. If the one that wins might be the one that has a really good product or service, but it's also really easy to buy it, to configure it, to install it, because that's all part of the experience. And again, Amazon recognized that and they made it effortless for people to buy stuff.
I really wish Starbucks would learn that lesson as well. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would want to go into a Starbucks and then I see the line there and I just turn on, and I walk away. And when I go into Starbucks, I mean, the things people are ordering in those Starbucks, you get in line behind people, these milkshakey coffee drinks that, these complicated,
Takes
whatever.
10 minutes to order. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And I whenever I go to Starbucks, it's always just to get a regular coffee. Like, I like their coffee. But they don't have a process. Like, usually, like, if you wait in line all that time and then they get you the coffee and then they just serve it right to you. And I always think to myself, like, why would they have like a self-service area just for Starbucks coffee? I can get my coffee and get the heck out of there, and I don't have to endure that line. And there's probably a reason why. I mean, maybe the people at Starbucks think it's an experience. You should be. Right.
That is exactly it.
Yeah.
First, I'll ask, have you ever tried mobile ordering with Starbucks?
Yeah. So my issue with mobile ordering with Starbucks is because I'm a cheapskate. I don't know if you knew this or not about me. I'm a CPA. If you haven't looked at this whole package, it shouldn't be a surprise. Yeah. But like mobile ordering, you gotta give Starbucks like money in advance, like $25 in advance on your, like, they have your money, and then I gotta like,
they have your money, but you don't have your coffee.
I don't have my coffee. I gotta like work it off. I'm like giving them all this money in advance for my coffee.
Well, the reason I ask is because the mobile ordering was actually Starbucks' solution to address the need that you're describing, because certain customers, time poor or whatever, they just wanted to get it in and out quickly. And, Starbucks wrestled with whether to roll that out, because their whole persona of their brand was about creating an authentic coffee house experience.
Yes.
And that, I would submit to you, is why they don't just let you set up, make your own coffee, because the interaction with the barista is very important to them.
Right.
And so they struggled for a while about whether should we do drive-throughs, should we do mobile ordering? And then in the end, they did start to do those things because they viewed it as a tweak to the experience that would resonate with a certain type of customer. And, that's one fundamental tenet of customer experience, is you have to understand the target market that you're going after and create an experience that's relevant to them. As you know, that's one of the 12 principles. Right. And so, that's, I think that's why you can't make your own coffee in Starbucks. And the closest they'll let you get to it is by doing the ordering online and then coming in.
And even that requires, I mean, you've got to set up the account, you got to pay them in advance. And then if I want a coffee, I got to, pull up the app, order the coffee, do the whole thing, whatever. And I get it. Listen, John, I can promise you that the brand managers at Starbucks are way more smarter about this stuff than I will ever be. So I get there's a reason, to the madness. But you just talked about making it effortless, like Amazon did, and they for all of us, if we can focus on those things that could make the experience better for our customers.
And this actually, if I might, because I think this will be very important for your listeners.
Sure.
The 12 principles, I call them universal principles of customer experience design, but it doesn't mean they have to be applied universally.
Okay.
And I talk about this in the book, and this is a very important takeaway, because you could look, there are some companies that are out there that are renowned for their customer experience, yet are not effortless to work with.
Right.
You look, for example, at an Aldi grocery store, highly rated by their customers, but not effortless. You got to bag your own groceries. To get a shopping cart, you got to get a quarter, put it in to get the cart out, and then return the cart to get your quarter back. So, you look at a company like that, or a company like IKEA, where if I just want to buy a light bulb, I got to snake through the entire store to get to the shelves to pick up my light bulb. That's not effortless. But what those companies are doing is they are doubling down on other elements of the 12 principles. And so they make a conscious decision that we're not going to be known for being effortless, but we're going to be known for something else. And that's an important point, because I don't want anybody to walk away thinking, well, gee, we've got to nail all 12. That's not necessarily the case.
Got it. Let's talk about emotions as well. You talked about MailChimp's Freddy High Five as something that stirs emotion. Most of my listeners and viewers are familiar with MailChimp as an email marketing service. But tell me about the Freddy High Five story.
Yeah. So you lead a business yourself, and so maybe and your listeners
we use
probably
MailChimp
do.
By the way.
What was that?
We use MailChimp.
Oh, great. Yeah. Okay. So anybody that is a small to medium-sized business owner, when you're doing email marketing, you're familiar with all of the anxiety before you hit the send button,
Right.
right? Because you've checked over that email, you've checked the links carefully. Like all you're thinking is, oh my gosh, is there a spelling error? Is there a grammar error? Is there a link that's broken? And when you finally hit that send button, there is some sense of accomplishment, like, all right, the missiles are flying, it's
Yep.
out there now.
Yep.
And there was a guy at MailChimp who used to work in a small business, and then he was hired by MailChimp, and he was one of their software designers. And he said that whenever in his former role, whenever he sent out an email marketing campaign, he always felt like somebody should, after he sent it, he felt like somebody should come in and pat him on the back, like just give him sort of like, good job, nicely done.
Right.
And he realized, he thought, why don't we do that for our customers? Because that's probably what they're feeling. And so that was the genesis of the Freddie High Five. Freddie is MailChimp's mascot. He's a monkey, I guess. And so, when for many years, they actually just recently changed this, but for many years, the way it worked was when you sent an email from MailChimp, Freddie appeared on the screen and he put his hand out like this to you and gave you a high five. And this kind of went viral. Like people started on social media sharing pictures and videos of themselves high-fiving their screen and high-fiving Freddie. But the guy that designed it, he acknowledged in interviews, this serves no functional purpose,
Right.
none at all. But it fits in with the principle about stirring emotion, because one way to make the experience not only better in the moment, but also more memorable, is to use emotion as a memory cue. And by celebrating wins with your customers, milestones, accomplishments, in essence, by cultivating a sense of positive emotions that they might already be feeling and priming them for that, what you're really doing is infusing the experience with a degree of emotion that helps to make it more positive and more memorable. And that's why it works. And it was a great addition for them.
And you don't think that that's like corny or goofy or anything like that, or is that just like, listen, people like that stuff?
Well, I think there's probably a certain segment of people out there that look at it and say it's corny and don't care about it and would never think to share a picture of themselves high-fiving their screen with Freddie. But there's definitely an entire segment out there that clearly it resonates with. Sure. Because they liked it, they took pictures of themselves with it. Here again, kind of old adage, you can't please everybody all the time. You just want to make sure that you're engineering an experience that certainly doesn't make anybody run for the hills.
Right.
But, nobody's going to like look at the Freddie high five and say, whoa, I am never doing business with MailChimp again. I mean, they'll just kind of ignore it. They'll sort of view it as, that's peculiar, but whatever. But for some people, yeah, it's just that little added something that makes them feel good about what they just did with MailChimp.
Okay. Another principle of great customer service is about being an advocate. You did give a couple of examples. Southwest Airlines. You had talked briefly about about how Alaska with getting bags, Southwest had eliminated their baggage fees, or their would not charge you for baggage fees. But you also talked about ING Bank as well, which is more boring than Southwest. And about being an advocate. What does being an advocate mean? What did ING Bank do that was a good example of being an advocate for their customers?
Yeah, so advocacy is a very powerful way to engage your customers. Again, whether it's an employee or a consumer. But the thing about advocacy is it's not the words that matter; it's the actions. It's, you got to kind of put your money where your mouth is, if you will. It's any business can say on their website or in their marketing materials, hey, we put our customers first and we advocate for our customers and we look out for your interests. But where the rubber really meets the road is what tangibly is the company doing that helps to demonstrate that. And with ING Direct, which became very quickly the biggest savings bank in the U.S., from nothing, it was founded by Arkady Kuhlman, and he did a number of things that he felt consumers needed in order to be protected from some of the evildoers within the financial services industry. Okay. So, for example, he made certain that people would not be awarded mortgages if there was not the right loan to value ratio. to make sure that we're not giving people mortgages who really couldn't afford those homes. Now, he was, prescient in this regard, because a few years afterwards, the Great Recession was brought on by the whole mortgage debacle, because a lot of other banks, they didn't care about, the loan to value ratios, and they were just, lending haphazardly. So that was an example of something that he did. He also said from the very beginning, he said, we are not going to take any money from millionaires, which is kind of striking. You're starting a new bank, you're trying to accumulate deposits. Why wouldn't you take money from millionaires? And the reason was, he said that if you are a millionaire, you likely need more support, more guidance than what ING Direct is being set up to provide. And so we don't think it's in your best interest to do business with us, because you'd be better served by another institution. So he basically said, hey, we're going to let that business go. And then the last example I'd give you too is ING Direct did not have any brick and mortar stores, any brick and mortar branches. That obviously saved them a lot of money.
Sure.
Instead of choosing to just line their pockets with those savings, they gave it back to their customers in the form of much higher interest rates.
Right.
And so, these are all examples of ING Direct really choosing to forego greater financial return, you could argue, in the short term, by doing something right for its customers. Now, I say in the short term, but in the long term, it's the right answer, because in the long term, advocacy is what really drives people to continue to do business with you and to tell others about you.
Okay. We've only got about 10 minutes left, but that gives us time for just two more stories that I'd like you to relate. One is about one of my favorite sandwich shops in the country called Pret a Manger, which is big in the UK. My wife is from England, so we travel to London a lot. I would always made it, but then they moved over to the US a few years ago, and I've been growing around the country. And you say they deliver pleasant surprises. Tell us about what you mean.
Yep. So first, the surprises fit into the whole structure here because surprises are memorable.
Okay.
Whether they're really bad or really good, the way our brains are wired, if you come across something novel and new, it sticks in your head. Okay. So what Pret a Manger did is they sort of figured out, how do we flip the script in the standard playbook, if you will, of a fast casual restaurant? Because, you go into the store, you go into a store like this, and you grab your sandwich, you grab your coffee, and then you go up to the register to pay for it.
Right.
Well, what Pret a Manger did is they actually gave each location and each employee a weekly allotment of free drinks and food that they were permitted to give away. And so when the customer comes up to the what was that?
Such a great idea. Keep going.
Yeah. So when the customer comes up to the register, there's a chance that the employee will just say, hey, that's on us today. Have a great day. Now, Pret a Manger estimates that about a quarter of its customers have actually had this experience where at one point they were given their meal or drink for free. The beauty of this whole approach, it works on so many levels. First, it's surprising, so you remember it positively.
Sure.
But it stands out so much in your memory, you're going to tell other people about it. And so even the 75% of people who haven't experienced it, they probably have heard about it from a friend, and it just makes them want to go to Pret a Manger and, see, gee, I'll roll the dice today. Will mine be free? But then there's also another constituency that really benefits, and that's the employees themselves.
Yes.
Imagine being an employee at a sandwich shop and being empowered to make somebody's day by giving them a free lunch. You see a business person that just looks to be having a bad day, and so you say, hey, it's on us today. I mean, think about what that feels like to be an employee and to have that ability. So I think it was not only engaging for their customers, but also for their staff.
All of this dovetails in again with your original premise that customer service should be focused on both your consumers and also your employees as well. And you're right. Giving your employees the ability to delight your consumers, it's like killing two birds with one stone.
Exactly.
I just think it's a great policy. I will have to say that I've never been ordered given a free anything at Pret a Manger yet. And we go there a lot, so I'm waiting. Okay, I mean it's going to happen sometime soon, but I am aware that they do that. And I think it's a great idea. All right, John. So in the final few minutes that we have, there were maggots on a U.S. Airways flight at one point, but U.S. Airways managed to recover and turn this around into ultimately a positive for customer experience. Tell us about recovering with style and what U.S. Airways
well,
did.
actually, it was the U.S. Air story is actually a not good story of recovery. That's the bad one.
Sorry, I thought that they recovered my memory of it. This is bad because I didn't write the book. My memory of it was that they did respond, but I guess they didn't. So we're going to tell a bad story.
No. So,
all right, let's tell the bad story.
Of recovery that are told in the book, and the one there's a positive one from Ritz-Carlton.
I was just going to say in the dress. So you know what? Right. I don't want to mess with U.S. Airways. Only U.S. Airways doesn't even exist anymore. Forget about the maggot story. Let's talk about Ritz-Carlton and the dress, because that's right. Let's see this interview off at least as like on a good note. What did Ritz-Carlton do?
So, the point about the recover with style principle is it ties in a little bit with the finish strong that we talked about earlier. It's this notion that if you have a failure in the customer experience, that you don't have to resign yourself to creating a brand detractor. Right. That if you focus on overcorrecting on the recovery, really knocking the ball out of the park on the recovery, you're actually finishing strong, and you're finishing with such a peak at the end of that recovery that it can actually eclipse the negativity of the failure itself. This has actually been studied a lot. It actually has a term associated with it. It's called the service paradox. Okay. And it basically refers to this idea that if you recover really well from a failure, you could end up with a more loyal customer after the recovery than you had even before the failure.
So what did
and so the Ritz-Carlton story is about an incident that I had when I was working in the corporate world, and I was going to this big conference for top producing salespeople at our company. Okay. And, it was a huge deal. The CEO, the board of directors were there. It was a recognition event, and it was held at the Ritz-Carlton in Naples, Florida. And there was a black tie formal dinner one night, really big deal. And I take my wife with me, and she bought this lovely evening gown for the black tie event. Mm-hmm. And when we got to the Ritz-Carlton, we're unpacking our bags, and she noticed that her formal evening gown got all wrinkled in transit. And so she sent it out to the Ritz-Carlton dry cleaning service to be pressed. Well, the next day it came back, and I kid you not, it's like the size of a Barbie doll. There's like no way that she's going to squeeze into it. And they're just a couple days before the event, and she's freaking out because she has nothing to wear. Well, right. Suffice it to say, the recovery was just amazing. I ended up contacting the front desk, spoke to the hotel manager. He basically arranged for an all expense paid trip for my wife in a limo to the local high-end mall with a personal shopper to get a new dress and shoes and accessories to go with it. Ritz paid for it all.
Oh my God.
And then the night of the event, we actually discovered just, 45 minutes before the event that the store had left the ink cartridge, the anti-shoplifting ink cartridge on the bottom of the dress. And so I called down and spoke to the hotel manager. And what did he do? He summoned someone from the store to come to our room with the ink cartridge removal device and took it off. The recovery just never stopped. And then it gets even better. We go down to the event, and we're at our table. And there's nobody at our table yet. We're there a little early, and I've got my head down. I'm looking at the menu to decide what I'm going to order. And I look up because I hear clapping. And there at the end of the table is the Ritz-Carlton hotel manager and his staff clapping, applauding in admiration of how beautiful my wife looks in her new dress. And it was just like the scene from Pretty Woman where Julia Roberts, had to get a dress for Richard Gere's event. And she came back into the hotel wearing it, and all the hotel staff were fawning over her. But that actually happened to me and my wife. And it was a great example of taking what could have been an awful, awful, emotionally scarring experience and turning it into something legendary.
There's also another point that you made in that chapter, which again dovetails to the example you used with Pret a Manger and from the beginning of the book. But the staff at Ritz-Carlton were given the license to do this, right?
Yes. Yeah. Ritz-Carlton is famous for giving every staff person, no matter where they work within the hotel, everybody's got $2,000 a day that they can use to make something right for a customer. And they don't have to ask anybody. They just use it. And, there are many businesses where the executives will be like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I wouldn't dare. I would be scared to give that authority to my staff. But, the Ritz-Carlton doesn't do it in a vacuum. They're really good at hiring people that exercise good judgment, that are smart, intelligent people. And they educate them well, they train them well, they give them good guidelines to work from. And then they let them go out, and make it happen. And they trust their people. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They create an environment where people are keen to take ownership and accountability for helping customers. And oftentimes that's all customers want. They just want somebody to step forward and confidently say, I can help you with that, and then to deliver.
Jon, you've been doing this for a number of years. You consult on customer service. You are, obviously you've worked with a lot of major brands, and then you sit down and you write this book. A lot of people, just about all the people that I know who write books, particularly on business or lessons learned or whatever, they walk out of it even more educated from it than they were before they started writing the book. And so I got to ask you, as we close this out, like, what was, when you finally finished this book, what was something that you took away from this book that surprised you, that you really learned from about customer service?
Wow, that's such an interesting question. The act of researching the book was a very enjoyable exercise, because while I had all 12 principles in my mind and I had lots of examples of them,
Yeah.
I went down a few rabbit holes and I found new examples that I just found really interesting and put in the book. So that was one thing that I learned, was just, other illustrations of these principles at work. But I think that the other thing I would mention would be this notion of how the principles play off of one another. They don't sort of work in a vacuum. If you demonstrate advocacy for a customer, it also stirs emotion in them. And you might also, depending on where that advocacy occurs, you might also be finishing strong at the same time. And so what I really came away with was a new appreciation for how the 12 principles play off of one another and almost create like a flywheel effect. They're just kind of bigger than the sum is greater than the parts, if you will.
Right.
And that was definitely something that I developed a stronger appreciation for once I kind of stepped back and looked at all the stories I had come up with, all the examples. And I think that really underscores why customer experience can be such a strong competitive differentiator, because once you get these principles working and alignment and all the ducks in a row, it's just, it creates momentum. It creates a flywheel effect that's very powerful and hard for a competitor to overcome.
The book is called From Impressed to Obsessed: 12 Principles for Turning Customers and Employees into Lifelong Fans. If we were doing this a number of years, a lot of people hold up the, the copy of the book, like, here it is. And you've got it, right? You can hold it. This will be flashed on the screen all over, but I'm glad you've got it as well. I got to remember to ask my authors in the future to also hold up the book, because I get the digital version. Love the book, learned a lot of great stories. And I'm gonna plagiarize some of those stories and some of the when I speak to my clients as well, about really great examples of customer service. Jon Picoult, thank you very much. I learned so much in this conversation from your book, and I appreciate you coming on and talking.
Thank you, Gene. I had fun. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Take care then. We'll be back sometime soon, 2 weeks, with another episode of BizBooks. Thank you very much for joining us, guys.